The Sony and Insomniac games ransomware leak is truly terrible, and I'm very sorry to the developers and to everyone that was impacted because this was just not a great thing that happened. Now, according to Cyber Daily, this is from Gameworldobserver, the Ricida ransomware group was behind the data breach. Now, it demanded 50 bitcoins, or around $2 million, and eventually leaked a total of 1.67 terabytes of data and 1.3 million files belonging to Insomniac Games. Now, the hackers told the publication that the developers making games like this would be an easy target. That was a quote on that, adding that they were able to get the domain administrator within 20 to 25 minutes of hacking the network. Now, Sony, they have stated that they have launched an official investigation. I would hope so. They just got a bunch of information leaked about a lot of games and sensitive information on their employees as well, saying that it has, quote, no reason to believe that any other SIE or Sony divisions have been impacted. Now, that was via Eurogamer. Now, the leak contains information, and we're going to talk about what the title is too, but there's a lot to get into. The information on Insomniac's pipeline, a schedule of its future releases, details about the upcoming Wolverine games, plans for other titles based on the X-Men license, and more. Now, I won't be showing any of the actual leaked footage from Wolverine and everything. If you want to know more about that, I will just say, hey, go to Twitter or X or just Google search it and you will find the leaked footage. It's not complete, guys. It's very similar to the whole Grand Theft Auto leak that happened, I think, last year or so, where it's just, alpha or early gameplay footage. It's not completely done. The cutscenes aren't all there. The voice acting isn't complete. So there's not really much to see, but essentially it very much plays like God of War. I mean, I'm pretty sure it'll be different than God of War and Spider-Man and all that, but it's the behind the back, third person kind of visceral combat, but very similar to God of War in some sense, but with Wolverine. And I think that eventually, once the game is done, it will probably be really good because Insomniac always makes pretty good games. But the focus of this video is going to be talking about AAA game development and why it might be in a bit of trouble and things need to change. Things might be a bit dire. Now, before we get into that, what's good, everyone? OJ here. Welcome back to another video. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, and click that notification bell to get my videos first. Now, let's go over this leaked budgets and ROI of Insomniac games. Once again, I will not be covering any of the leaked actual footage or personal information of anybody from Insomniac, but I do want to go over this because I think this information is pertinent to what I've been saying. Like, this is exactly what I've been saying, and some of the moves that we see Nintendo or some of these other companies do are because of what's happening right here. This is a microcosm of the industry and how crazy budgets have just spiraled out of control. So if you're looking at this, we're going to go from left to right. So you see at the top here, I'm going to break it down for you guys. At the top, you have the title, you have Miles Morales, Spider-Man 1, the remaster, you have Ratchet and Clank, Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man 3. Now, that's not announced yet, but of course, they're going to make a Spider-Man 3, obviously. And then you have Wolverine. Now, this is for Insomniac Games. They're breaking down their budgets. Now, if you look at the lifetime sales, you can see here, 10.2 million, 4 million for Spider-Man 1. Ratchet and Clank, 2.2 million. We're going to focus on that in just a bit because that's where I think there is a big issue, especially considering every other game here is all just licensed, major, big budget, Marvel, whatever the case is, where there isn't a lot of room for other types of games. So Spider-Man 2, 10.5 million. They're estimating that the game just came out, but they've already sold 5 million plus at this point. So they're estimating with bundles and everything that it will hit 10.5 million at the minimum. Spider-Man 3, they're expecting to sell more, 14.5, because obviously it would be with a bigger PlayStation 5 install base. And then Wolverine, they're estimating 10 million units. Next up, they go over revenue, which is how much they have made off the game or what they think they're going to make off the game based off of the sales. You see here for Miles Morales, 260 million. Spider-Man 1 remastered, $50 million, Ratchet and Clank $73 million, Spider-Man 2 $390 million, Spider-Man 3 $555 million, and Wolverine $390 million. Now, this is what is important to kind of focus on from here on out, because you have the cost. Obviously, you're going to make money, but it also costs a lot of money to make these games. So $156 million for Miles Morales, a smaller game when it comes to Spider-Man, but still a pretty major project. But they came off pretty good with that, right? $104 million total in profit. Then you look at Spider-Man 1 Remastered, $40 million, a little bit less than that, and they made $11 million off of that. You look at Spider-Man 2, $315 million to make the game. That is insane when it comes to it. $300 million, and they're projected to make about $75 million off of it. Spider-Man 3, $385 million. They're expected to almost go up $100 million from Spider-Man 2 to $170 million, and they're expecting to make less with Wolverine, because Wolverine isn't as popular of an IP as Spider-Man, so they're expecting to make about $85 million off of that. But the one right here that I have to talk about, and that is Ratchet and Clank. So Ratchet and Clank was one of the big system movers or system sellers. At least that's what Sony thought it would be. They were talking about the SSD. They were talking about the hard drive and how you can do all this. Ratchet and Clank was a massive game for them. Now, obviously, budget-wise, it wasn't as big as Spider-Man as some of these other games, although a lot of this is marketing and licensing fees when it comes to Spider-Man and marketing and everything with Marvel. But still, $81 million is not a small amount, only about 20 million or so away from 100 million, and they actually lost $8 million. So their ROI, or return on investment, was negative 10%. Now, breaking even would be about 2 million plus, but even with that, they just weren't able to get that. So it makes me wonder, and it makes me think, something needs to change, or is something going to change with this? Because you have a great original staple IP for Sony with Ratchet and Clank, and the fact that they actually lost $8 million on this is wild. And what if it's not Marvel? What if it's not something that you know that you can sit there and sell through like the patented and true sales ways, right? Because it's Marvel, so obviously it's going to sell Spider-Man. But as you can see here, Insomniac is in a little bit of a bind, and I think that this same situation that's happening with Insomniac, with having to do Marvel and having to kind of stick to it and having to spend large amounts of money to be able to be profitable, is definitely a problem. Because Ratchet and Clank is the type of game, when it comes down to it, if you look at the review scores and if you look at what the developers are saying and what people are saying about the game, you would think that it would be maybe profitable, right? You would think that they would make some money off of it, but they didn't. So since they did not make money off Ratchet and Clank, that's not really going to entice them to make more original IPs or to make more of their own IPs and not be stuck with Marvel licenses over and over and over. Now, in this leak, we know at least IGN and many other sites are reporting, and I think if you just dig deeper into the leak, that they have actually signed a deal with them to make X-Men and Marvel games through 2035. So it's going to be another decade plus of this Marvel down your throats overall, and which could be cool. I mean, obviously X-Men is dope. I played a lot of X-Men games back in the day. I played a lot of Marvel games back in the day. I'm not as big of a Marvel fan anymore, and I don't sit there and play all the different Marvel games and everything just because there's so many. But I am looking forward to Blade just because that's something different. We haven't had a Blade game in a very long time. I think since the PS1 or PS2 days for Blade. So I am looking forward to seeing how that game plays out. But overall, this is a little bit disheartening, you know, because I did buy Ratchet and Clank day one, and I don't think the game is worth $70, but I would have eventually bought the game anyway. But they're losing money on a game like Ratchet and Clank. So as you can see, they're really going to stick with Spider-Man. They're really going to stick with Marvel. They're not really going to maneuver too far out because it's just too costly. It's too much of a risk to do anything outside of the tried and true for them. And remember, Sony does not have the 2D platformers that can do big numbers. They do not have the other types of smaller games like Gravity Rush or other titles that can actually fill in the gaps and not cost $80 million plus or $300 million or $200 million or $100 million. Everything that Sony does by themselves, at least, it has to be some type of major or big budget thing, or you're essentially not going to see it much at all. And I noticed that with the PlayStation 5, we're really not getting those AA titles, those small smaller end games really anymore. We're not seeing those just because of what they have to do to actually be profitable. So I do feel that something absolutely needs to change here. I think that these spiraling budgets of 200 to 300 million are just crazy. Now, there's obviously high risk, high reward, so it's not like it's all doom and gloom here, guys. I think that Sony, obviously, they're making money with these big games. As you can see right here, they're going to make money off of Spider-Man, but it does seem like anything else outside of that is just a massive risk and something that Sony might not be willing to do. They're going to stick to their guns when it comes to what they know. If they're going to spend $100 million plus 200 million, 300 million, they're going to stick with the license. They're going to stick with what they know can make a lot of money, because this Ratchet and Clank experiment, for a franchise that's been around for a very long time, and I'm guessing has been profitable before, the fact that they weren't able to do that, and now what, it's been 2+ years since the release and it's essentially stopped selling at this point. That's definitely not a good thing and something that's very unfortunate. And it seems like things are going to continue potentially getting even worse because of inflation, because of new technology that's costing more, 8K or whatever else Sony's going to do. It almost seems like the budgets can't keep up with the technology or the type of games that Sony makes. And that's what they do make. They make these big behind the shoulder, behind the back, behind the shoulder, AAA, huge graphics, full voice acting, full everything. And that's fine. Their fans love that style of game. And clearly that is the defining thing that makes Sony at this point. That's their new identity, but I'm not sure if it's going to be sustainable, or you're just essentially going to get just licensed games all the time. You're not really going to get the AA games in between, and everything's going to be shifted or kind of geared towards this style of game. It's either AAA or bust. Sony's like, oh, nope, we're good with all the other things. Maybe like a game like Little Big Planet, or maybe something like Sly Cooper, or some of these other titles that could be AA games. Well, if you look at it, when you look at what people are expecting with the graphics and everything, it doesn't seem like there's going to be good ROI or return on investment, or even to break even is going to be a problem when it comes down to some of these games that's not Marvel and not Spider-Man. So that's the upsetting thing that I think that needs to change, but it's going to absolutely be interesting to see how all of this moves. Now, to kind of relate it a little bit to, what I was talking about before with Nintendo or with other companies, right? Microsoft and everything, they have a whole different business structure. Microsoft has everything Game Pass, right? They want you to all go through subscription services, and they feel that can mitigate the huge cost for big AAA games. Now, I'm not exactly sure if that's going to be the case. I know Microsoft reports certain things, but Microsoft doesn't talk about the game sales like that. They talk about revenues. They don't give us complete full Game Pass numbers anymore. So there's a lot of missing information to see if that's going to end up being something incredibly viable in the future without a lot of price increases. And if you look at Nintendo, they're pretty much transparent with what they sell. Now, they're not completely transparent when it comes to the cost of development, which they don't have to be. I mean, this was obviously leaked and Sony doesn't say this, neither does Microsoft, but they do give us these sales numbers. And if you look at the type of games that Nintendo makes, obviously they don't cost 200 million, 300 million. I mean, I would guess maybe The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is a game that can cost up to $100 million, but Nintendo does not make a lot of games like The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Most of their games are probably underneath the 81 million mark that even Ratchet and Clank had. I think most of their games are probably going to be somewhere between the 30, 40 million in terms of their biggest games, somewhere in that range, maybe even less. And I think a lot of their games are actually not even up to that. I'm not sure how much like a game like Nintendo Switch Sports costs, but that game can sell 10 million units. Or a game, for example, like Super Mario Party or Mario Party Superstars, those games can sell 10 million units plus, and I'm sure that they probably don't cost anywhere near as much as like Spider-Man 1 Remastered. Like, that's 40 million. Not sure if Nintendo's even spending that much. Or even if you're looking at it from a scope like a Metroid Dread from Mercury Steam, a 2D game, and definitely not a cheap game in its own right, but absolutely not a $80 million plus game. But they can go out there and sell 3 million plus copies of Metroid Dread at the pretty much full price, not heavily discounted or anything like that. Those are the type of advantages that Nintendo has in terms of building their IP and not really stacking the costs and having costs spiral out of control when it comes to what the fans are buying. So Nintendo has other AA or smaller type of games to supplement their bigger games, and even with their bigger games, I'm pretty sure they don't cost $300 million to make their biggest games like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe a remaster, right? Or something like Animal Crossing New Horizons. They're expensive, but they're nowhere near this. So Nintendo's kind of a little bit in a different type of way. And I think that's part of the fear that Nintendo had with maybe making a system that's this much more powerful and all of that, because you start getting these spiraling budgets and it kind of deadlocks you into making, okay, we're just going to kind of do this and not try out some other different things, or have smaller AA games that can be profitable, or smaller types of games or spin-offs and things like that. So I think it's all relative to exactly what Sony is and where they are in the market and what the fans are expecting with games like God of War Ragnarok and Horizon Zero Dawn, which that game cost $200 million plus to make. Last of Us Part 2 cost $200 million to make, and those are PlayStation 4 games essentially, not even PlayStation 5 games specifically, but PS4 games ported over to PS5. So it's only going to continue going up and up and up. And Spider-Man 3 being $385 million to make, imagine the next The Last of Us, right? Imagine the next Horizon that's built specifically for the PlayStation 5. I'm pretty sure those would be more expensive than what we saw here with Spider-Man 3. Another thing to note with this leak here is that Sunset Overdrive, the Xbox exclusive that Insomniac Games made back for the Xbox One, that only made them $567 of profit. So it kind of leads more people to believe that, yeah, this is the reason why they're going to be sticking with Marvel, and you're not going to see a lot of these different types of games from Sony and from a lot of big developers, big publishers out there. So something has to give here, and I'm not sure what it's going to be, but I think that the indie scene is absolutely helping. We're seeing a lot of developers able to make AA and indie games and do well and actually keep things afloat and make money. So I think that that's going to be part of the recovery when it comes down to it. We're seeing a lot of closures, a lot of layoffs, even from the biggest developers out there. For example, we're seeing like the whole thing with Embracer and how they pretty much closed down a lot of different teams that they bought. Epic, where they laid off a bunch of employees despite Fortnite being one of the biggest, if not the biggest free-to-play game right now. So right now, AAA game development is not necessarily healthy all around, but we'll see how things get as Nintendo puts out their new system, as developers get more comfortable with the Xbox Series and the PlayStation 5. We'll see what's done to kind of mitigate some of these things, and we'll see what Sony does going forward in the future, especially with this terrible leak that's going on here. So what are your thoughts on all of this here, guys? What do you think needs to change, if anything at all? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and we'll see you for the next one. Peace.